Hi guys, hope you're all safe and well. Welcome to our first ever Code and Create session with Orbis Connect. Over the next sort of several weeks, we'll be doing this every Wednesday between 12 and 1 UK time. We'll have a different speaker every week discussing everything from DevOps to React. So yeah, make sure you're following our Orbis Connect page on Meetup and on Crowdcast, of course, to keep an eye on all of our events. If you are viewing from Crowdcast, there's a button below where you can join our page and keep up to date on everything that we've got going on. So yeah, we've got some really cool speakers lined up already over the next several weeks. So really excited to get this going. Today we've got Jai Campbell as our first guest speaker. He is a GCP DevOps engineer currently at Lloyds. Jay will be discussing the importance of blameless post mortems within SRE. So he's put together a few polls as well down below. You can see the polls, so get involved on those if you're watching on Crowdcast, of course. I am an Xbox man myself, so hopefully I'm rooting for Xbox there for sure. Also, at the end, we'll be doing a Q&A session. So if you're watching on Crowdcast, then you should see a question button below where you can get in your questions throughout the talk, and we'll try and get to as many as we can at the end. We'll try not to go over 1 p.m. I know everyone's still working hard at home, so yeah, we'll try and keep it to the hour. So yeah, get in your questions. And we'll try and get round to them at the end, like I say. So yeah, without further ado, I'll pass you over to Jai. And also, while I'm doing that, just let us know where you're viewing in from on the chat bar on the side. I think it's that side as you're looking. So yeah, it'd be good to see where everyone is tuning in from. So I'm going to get up Jai's video now, and I'll let him crack on.
Hello everyone. Welcome for joining today. I'm just going to share my screen. Please bear with me. Okay. Can we all see that?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming today. I'm going to give this talk discussing blameless post mortems. Also, it will come from the viewpoint of an SRE. And I'll be using a AAA game running on Google Cloud as a kind of platform to showcase why blameless post mortem is important. Please bear with me, there's a bit of delay on the call, so it'll take me a minute or two to kind of get with it. Okay, so a quick overview. Discuss blameless post mortems, why they're important. Again, we'll use a real world gaming example. And I guess this talk will we'll see two target audiences: SREs, DevOps, sysadmins, engineers, and those with an interest in gaming, particularly how game engines work. Okay. Thank you to our unofficial sponsors, Google Cloud and Ubisoft. Okay, so SRE. The reason why I'm going to start with SRE is that there's a lot of similarities and crossovers when you think about implementing postmortems. So we'll discuss the SRE culture, and again, how that kind of translates to AAA games running on Kubernetes. We'll discuss accepting failure as normal. So postmortems, why we want to adopt postmortems and how do these help to influence a fail-fast culture? We want to reflect on what went well. Postmortems are a perfect opportunity to kind of have a look at these things. And again, what does reliable mean? So think about services that you might use: Netflix, Google, Amazon, AWS, all these kind of services. They all think about reliability in a slightly different way. Okay, postmortems for an online gaming. We'll look at a postmortem retrospective, and we'll look at some best practices, how you can write a postmortem, and some links and tips about how you can improve these. Okay, so let's start with SRE and postmortems. A little Easter egg for the chat. If anybody can identify what that nice little device is in the corner, you get some brownie points. Okay, so SRE. The reason why I'm going to quickly talk about SRE is my experience with postmortems as a site reliability engineer. Where these key points here kind of translate to blameless postmortems is that they all filter into creating a safe, blameless environment where you've got general observability over the entire stack, not just from a systems level, but also from the engineering and the cultural level from the business. So I'll run through these quickly. You reduce organizational silos, implement change gradually, leverage tooling and automation. All of these enable a fail-fast environment. And by doing this, by collaborating with your engineers, you're able to measure everything. And by doing so, you can make informed decisions of the environment, and it allows the engineer and the business as a whole to accept failure as normal. And again, duplicated slide. Blameless postmortems. So what kind of impact do they have on software delivery? Apologies, I can't see the chat window. So blameless postmortems, they create a psychological safe environment. So if you're going to think about a postmortem, you're bringing engineers, product owners into a room, and you're questioning, why did the service fail? Why are our users or our customers complaining? In an environment like this, for juniors and seniors, for people with different skill levels, you want to make it an open, collaborative environment where people are free to ask questions, and there's no blaming, there's no finger pointing. We're asking questions about the system, not about individuals. And why we do this is to enable fail fast again. We have high collaboration, high cooperation. When we have system outages, we see this as something where we can learn from, where we can develop faster in the future. And there's a faster time to resolution. So when we start thinking about estimated time to resolution or to detection, we can improve all of these things. So let's set the platform. AAA games in Kubernetes. Massive is a game studio from Ubisoft. They've developed their own game engine for an online game. I have a quick video here where I can show you some of the game engine. See if it plays. So it's essentially, the Division 2 is an online multiplayer shooter. It's global, it runs on Kubernetes, and it's built with a thing called the Snowdrop engine. Think of something like Photoshop, but for building games. So this is essentially what this. If we quickly jump back here, we can see the editor in practice. Pointer. Okay, so technically, if we start from left to right, Ubisoft have partnered with Google. They've built the game infrastructure on GCP. The game runs in Kubernetes, well, it's orchestrated by Kubernetes, I should say. Integrated with Kubernetes, they're using a product which was built by Google, Ubisoft, and a couple of other companies that allows you to manage game fleets over the globe. Utilizing Ubisoft and Massive's game engine, there's an integration between Snowdrop and Agonis, which allows it to work on the PlayStation network and produce the game state which you will probably be used to. On this slide, there's further links if you'd like to look at this information after this presentation. For the cloud engineers amongst you, this is Google's beta product. It's called Google Gaming. It's separate from Stadia. This is a totally different beast. You use this with Kubernetes. For those that are interested, there's links in the slides. You can run up a sample demo, game savers, and have a look yourself. Unfortunately, Ubisoft's game engine Snowdrop is proprietary, so you can't use that. Okay, so as we move in to start looking at this post-mortem, imagine, and we're going to use the division 2 as an example to see how we'd implement a change that goes wrong, and then a post-mortem resulting from that. So the change that we would like to implement, or the division software team, the people that you see here are different factions within the game. If you look at the cleaners compared to the rogue, they all have separate traits. So the algorithm determines for each group how they respond to the game player's actions. As a software team, we'd like all of these groups to act independently and differently. So here's an example of a kind of feature change we'd like to make. Signature weapons against named NPCs. For the non-gamers, NPCs is non-playable characters. So these are driven by AI. And what the software team would have liked to have done is increase the signature damage dealt to named enemies, which is essentially the game player. An interesting thing here is that what the Division 2 game developers have done, they've spun up a sample test server. So in a similar kind of mindset to blue-green deployments, they have a newer version of the game. They release that to a subset of players, and they can test new features, which hopefully will catch any issues before they release further title updates. And also on this slide, there's a link to have a look at how they do that. So this is the response. The players responded to the changes to AI. And as you can imagine, not everybody was happy with the changes that were implemented. Having a look at the top one, bullet sponge enemies. I hate when non-tanking guys in hoodies and shit rush at you with gold and HP and abuse to kill you and don't even try to cover. So there's an example of users that are not happy with the AI changes. Another one at the bottom, the AI is terrible and easily exploitable. A key point here, a lot of companies don't actually reach out to the users like this and actually really dig deep into the comments and complaints that the users may have. You see it a lot in gaming because of the community relationship and the community relationships that the software engineers make. Okay, so the software release failed. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to have a blameless post-mortem. We'll have a look at the intention for release. We've had a look at the feedback, and further down, we're going to have a look at some post-mortem implementation. Again, for the gamers. And for those that like AI systems and algorithms, I've got a link here to how the division builds automated bots into their game engine to test scripting and pathing for the different systems within the game. So, similar to a post-mortem, there's a retrospective. We'll move on from this slide. So, the post-mortem. This post-mortem here, there's a link in the slide deck, which will be shared afterwards. It's a pretty generic post-mortem template, but it gives you an indication and an idea. Apologies. An indication and an idea of the kind of things that you would like to look for as a team and as a business when looking at, say, P1 incidents. One thing that I'd like to bring up here is that post-mortems, they're very valuable. And from my experience as an operations engineer, not only as a sysadmin, but also as an SRE, is that post-mortems tend not to be done to the level that you would expect, because people don't like to ask the hard questions with an environment. A lot of environment systems have underlying issues that might have been occurring for years, and to fix them takes a lot of engineering effort, and it takes a lot of cost. So let's have a look at this example. And we'll run through it. You'll be able to have a look in your own time or ask questions at the end of the talk. So we have a status and a summary. A good post-mortem wants to be clear and concise. It wants to be very descriptive of what the issue is. And hopefully on the example that I show, you'll be able to see that. Impact. So what was the impact of the issue? Very important that you have this described very clearly in the post-mortem. Was it data loss, availability? What was the actual impact? The root cause. What was the highest level issue? What was the one thing that caused all the other issues to cascade and fail? The trigger. What initiated the cascading failure or the failure itself? And then the resolution. What steps are taken to mitigate or actually fix the issue? Short-term action and anything that was done. Lessons learned, things that went well, a reflection point for the team and the systems, and then action items, very important. What are the follow-up steps? The main purpose of having a postmortem is to identify issues that can be fixed and to take action on these so they don't happen again. So looking at the AI system previously, say we had our own game and we introduced AI and the user base were not happy. One of the issues, or one of the bad postmortem examples that we could have drawn could look something like this. So this isn't a full list, it's only a snapshot. Again, it'll give you a bit of an indication of where you can start looking and the kind of things you need to avoid and things you should include. So we've got a status. The AI is acting up. It's a bit vague. Summary. After on level 2 broke the AI, and now nothing's working. Users and bots are going crazy as it worked before. We should not let the AI team push changes. They always break the game. An impact. We've got users complaining on YouTube and exploiting bugs, and their game sessions are broken. The root cause was Arthur. His new script is always acting up in prod. And then the revenue. Nothing much to say there. So quickly looking over this, is that the main issue that we have that I've highlighted in red is that on a blameless postmortem, we want to be focusing on systems and processes, not individuals or teams, definitely not people. We're looking at the environment and we're looking at ways that things failed and how we can improve in the future. Again, the summary is very vague. Arthur on level 2 broke the AI and now nothing's working. What's nothing? What's working? What do these two statements mean? What does this one statement mean? The user bots are going crazy as it worked before. What did before look like? All these terms are not useful to anybody picking this up. You have to remember that SREs are engineers. They're often working on fixing things. So they need information to save stress and to save time. So let's move on to an example of a good postmortem. Again, it's a small snapshot, but it hopefully gives you an indication of some of the things that we've changed from the bad. So straight away, we have owner, date, and who the postmortem was shared with. The owner identifies who was responsible for creating the postmortem, the date it was created, and who has access to the contents of this information. The status of the issue and a summary. If you look at the summary, we have the AI system has regressed and the NPC AI scripting is performing erratically across all game servers at 8:45 a.m. 25th of the 4th, 2020. There was a spike in CPU activity across all services responsible for AI mapping. It's not a perfect summary, but we can immediately see that there's more definite actual points about what the issue was. There's more information, and for somebody looking at this, they've got a clearer indication of what happened, when, and what services are affected. On the second page of the good postmortem, if we look at the root cause, we have a new AI feature was introduced to game version v1.9. It affected the pathing, and we've also added a ticket to a known bug that was brought back as part of this. A quick point, and this is mainly for the Division 2, for the gamers that kind of reverse engineer based on the updates that the Massive releases. What Massive does when they break a game, and it's probably other companies do this, they will roll back to an earlier version if they can't fix, for example, if it's a major update. than a smaller update. Let's have a quick look. We're going to brush over this, but this is essentially what Massive did. So from the division 1, they had a lot of negative feedback about the AI. They had some good feedback as well, but based upon their wishes to change and improve the AI system, they built a new AI. So this table here kind of demonstrates how they get some kind of differentiation between the different groups. If we look at the aggression trait here, it's split into 2. We've got aggressive and defensive. So for example, if I was for the True Science faction, my traits would be defensive, organized, trained, and medium tech. Hello? Okay, we're back. If I jump back, so they split that like that. They split it furthermore. So for the aggressive trait, there's different traits assigned with the aggressive traits as well to further more differentiate between the different factions. And again, they've done it with the defensive to add wider variety. But when you're including all these different types of systems, there's going to be unknown issues and bugs that are going to surface, which is why postmortems are vital to picking up what changed and when. So, awesome. Blamelessness, avoiding who. This is the real key point, because when we having a blameless postmortem, we want to focus on the systems and the processes. Again, not the team, not the individual that made the change or made the fix. It's about how do we improve? How do we learn from our past mistakes to make tomorrow better? A quick Easter egg, the character that you see on the right-hand side of the screen is actually my in-game character from the Division 2. And the device in his mouth is actually a bug that I found. I've reported it, but it hasn't been fixed yet. It looks pretty cool though. Okay. Let's see. So, why would you write a blameless postmortem? And this is really important. If as an SRE, when you're building out service level objectives, you want them to be generic in such a way that the whole engineering team understands what you're talking about. And it's the same thing with blameless postmortems. You want to set and record in writing and communicate them internally. And what that means is it's a written record of events. It provides long-term value across teams, to the SRE team, and also to business leaders that you may not think have any kind of involvement in the work that you do. Also, there's a formalized process that all engineers and managers can learn from and they can reference. And with that kind of framework and guardrails, it also provides a safe environment for people, because when things break, there's an understood pattern and way of fixing things. And there's also a library for you to reference if you need to have a look at what happened. Secondly, mistakes are opportunities to learn and improve from. So if you want to have a safe, fail-fast environment where you're doing feature releases maybe daily or weekly, really high velocity, there's going to be things that break. It's inevitable. So in order to have that kind of environment, you need to build and instill camaraderie between the team. And by having open platforms, you allow juniors and the seniors to meet together, and also teams from outside. So let me explain this part. If you have a large company, you might have an application where 15 different teams are working on different components of the application, and they might never ever meet, or they might be working on different sides of the globe. This provides a way for everybody to communicate and collaborate. Another big point as well, it flushes out long-standing issues. For junior engineers, and what I found when I was working operationally, is that for established organizations or established processes, there might be long-standing issues that nobody wants to fix, and they just treat them as part of the day job. Having postmortems where you're looking at fixing underlying issues will raise these and they'll bring them to the surface. It's a systematic way to look at your environment. So let's have a look at some best practice for writing blameless postmortems. Writing postmortem best practices. So this is a real important one. We would like to avoid blameful animated language. So think about it like this, where the development team, or I'm an engineer for a development team, is really famous. We've just launched the new version and it breaks. The next day we've been called into the war room or the postmortem room. And straight away somebody from a separate team points at you or your colleague and says, it was Arthur's fault. It was that change. You effing whoever, this kind of stuff. It should be a nice environment where people feel that they can openly ask questions, where there's no blame, and a place where everybody's on the same page in terms of accepting things break, and we need to work together to make this a better system. A quick tip on this, if you're a company that doesn't run game days, doesn't run postmortems, a good way to get a feeling, especially for senior management, is for you to run a game day and get a feeling of how your engineering copes when you run a postmortem before actually running one on a real P1 outage, and get your engineering team used to the process of going through writing these postmortems. Okay, so number 2, focusing on improvement. Again, we're learning from our mistakes. We've got higher visibility, high observability of the whole environment, how we're deploying changes, feature releases when things break. So how do we use this to inform new decisions? These are really valuable opportunities because nobody wants to break production unnecessarily. So use these and really focus and use this on a time to look at weak points in your system and try to bring them up to speed as quickly as possible. And iterate. You're not going to do everything in one, so take it in small steps, but use these as positive things because, again, things break. It's how you address and plan for the future. And then lastly, and this isn't a exhaustive list, these are just a few of the main ones. You want to promoting an iterative and collaborative process. And this kind of ties back into SRE with collaboration, with tool training, iteration. It's the culture that you're building around the postmortems so that when things break, people are used to things breaking. And they're also used to taking the steps and actions and being able to call out people to get the time that they need to fix things. And it's visible because you're documenting all these steps. You're able to see over time, historically, that things have either improved or they've regressed. And again, this is from the beginning. It's reinforcing all of these facts that I kind of mentioned. With a blameless postmortem, you create an environment where there's a lot of cooperation. Operations team that are looking after systems. Generally, you're pretty close in terms of friendships. There's a lot of trust. There's handovers that happen. Not every issue or incident gets resolved by yourself. You might have to hand over to someone in your team or someone in another country. So having the visibility and the culture of collaboration just breeds that that sharing sensibility with your engineering staff. It actually finished quicker than I thought. So, a few key takeaways. For the blameless postmortems, the main thing that we want to focus on is the systems and the processes that we're working on. We're going to have failures. The monitoring systems or the practices that we put in, or I mean, the frameworks that we put in place to kind of protect the environment from breaking, they might break. It's inevitable. So it's learning how to shape the culture to kind of accept failure as normal and embrace fail fast. It's really good to be iterative, and you're only going to learn and improve if you practice some of the things that we've been speaking about today. Okay. Joe.
All done. Lovely.
Hey.
Really cool. Thanks, Jai. Right, so let me just close this down. Here we go. So, yeah, thanks again, Jai. Really good, informative talk there on Blameless Post Mortems. Let's get to the Q&A. We've got a few questions in. If you are watching on Crowdcast, then this is your sort of final chance to get any questions in that you've got to that we can put to Jai. I know we are streaming on LinkedIn as well, so hello if you are streaming on there, if you are viewing in from LinkedIn. Right, okay, cool. So let's go on to our first question. I guess you touched on this slightly during the talk, but how does your company communicate failures internally?
Very good question. It depends on the company that you work for. Generally, companies will use something like Slack. If they have like a self-documenting environment, it can come through with the code itself. So there's some markdown text as part of the actual commit. But generally what you would like to have is a shared space that's communicated across the whole company, that's viewable by anybody that needs to have a look. But generally you'll find it in your ticketing system because it can be linked to the tickets that have been raised.
Do you find that changes in different sectors that you work across, Jai, in terms of maybe like financial sector or retail?
It does. So for a small startup company with like 3 or 4 engineers, it's probably going to be less compliant checks in place. So things are a lot more easy to view. They might just share something in Google Drive and have like a running document. For financial services, where you're thinking about compliance and PCI-SS, customer data, you have to redact a lot of things as well. So you might have a post-mortem that'll be publicly available, and some sections might be redacted depending on where it's linking to. But there will be a post-mortem for sure.
Cool. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Do you run game days to test the runbooks and support mechanisms that you have in place?
Currently, no. Previously, yes. We kind of build on that question. I have run game days kind of to influence what I've just spoke about before, in that they give the engineering team and the company a time to practice, to actually go through, test what their policies look like, how do people react, and how can they improve before an actual P1 incident arises. I would definitely say run a couple of them before you start thinking about doing them on a real live incident.
Okay, cool. So in terms of the post-mortems, do you run them where you currently work? If not, do you think they would benefit from doing so? Is that something that you're trying to implement as well, I guess, if it's not something that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, so game days and Blameless Post Mortems, they're very much culturally led. So very similar to SRE, you need a lot of senior management buy-in to really have them to be engaging and for them to be powerful and to kind of get the effects that you would like. It does take more engineering effort because you're building a lot more processes, you're using more tooling, you're bringing people out of their general, or normal workday work that they would do to bring them in to start working on these things. Game days as well, they surface off a lack of documentation, which is probably why you'll find a lot of engineering teams aren't a fan of doing them so much. Writing run books is not easy, or it's not easy to keep them up to date, which is where they get tested in game days. And again, that's a good point, actually. Game days are really good for testing your run books and testing the policies that you put in place. Sometimes you'll have a really high velocity environment, changes are going in all the time, and you lose track of what's happened and people aren't updating things as they should. So it gives you the impotence to say, hey, does this work as I expect it to? Yeah, I would like to have them more for sure. And it also tests your knowledge. If you build a system, does it work how you expect it to work? Does it fail in the ways that you expect it to fail? So it's a good test.
Do you find there's a struggle in getting that getting the point across of the benefits of doing this with, maybe senior stakeholders within the business or non-technical managers? Do you find that it's easy to convince them to go down this route?
Yes and no, depending on the company.
Yeah.
And depending on the engineering culture as well, depending on the size of the environment. For a small company that's got an engineering team of 4 or 5 people, running a game day is not going to affect that many people of the company. If you're a global company, say like LinkedIn, and you're running a game day, it could impact maybe 200 engineers across 7 different teams. So,
Yeah.
so the buy-in is imperative. And the senior management team will also inform how successful the game day and the postmortems can be, because they're the people that are going to influence and have the authority to tell the engineering team which systems they can run the game days against. So you really do need the buy-in. And there's a cost as well. You're taking engineers away from their desks to necessarily prove something out that you don't need to.
Yeah, of course. I guess that's probably the most difficult thing to turn these guys around. But cool. We've got one more question here, Jai. Let's get onto that. So, are the product teams the only ones practicing a blameless culture, or are you getting buy-in from other teams in the business as well? I guess we slightly touched on that, but if you can just elaborate on that question.
Yeah, I am getting buy-in. Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. Are the product teams the only ones practicing a blameless culture, or are you getting buy-in from other teams within the business as well?
I'll use past experience to kind of answer this question. It is a yes and no. Again, with SRE and operations, it's very much organization culture led. For my previous engagement, there was a lot of engagements across the whole DevOps, so across the whole engineering department. It wasn't just product teams, it was security teams, the platform team, feature teams. When the SRE team could prove that providing these kind of services internally for our teams, they saw the benefit and they was happy to contribute. Also, it allowed them to have more frequent releases as well. We'd embed that kind of stuff. And the collaboration was pretty uplifting. But that came from senior management. It really has to be driven from that kind of place.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So let's have a check-in on the polls, Jai. Sorry. Got Nintendo and PlayStation at the top. I wasn't expecting Nintendo to be one of the front runners, to be honest. What's your platform of choice?
PlayStation and Xbox, predominantly because they're building out their presence on gaming. For everybody in the chat, you might know Xbox has got their Project Cloud, and PlayStation has got their own PlayStation Network. Predominantly because they're almost running it like a Kubernetes environment, where a lot of the compute is done on some side of the network, and then some of it is done locally on essentially the node.
Right.
Which is pretty
Okay.
cool.
Cool. So, yeah, Joe, I really appreciate your time talking to us today for our first ever Code and Create. I'm sure people have enjoyed it across both Crowdcast and LinkedIn. And yeah, look, it's been great, and we'd like to have you back in the future. Like I say, guys, we've got quite a few of these Code and Create sessions lined up for the next several weeks. So if you are watching on Crowdcast, be sure to join our Connect community using the button below. If you're on LinkedIn watching, then you can find us via the Orbis Consultants page on LinkedIn. So again, yeah, thanks all for joining us, and massive thank you to Jai for being our guest today. So stay safe, everyone. Jai, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for
No
joining,
worries.
everybody.
This talk will be available in about an hour or so using the same link. You can come in and rewatch it back if you joined us late. And if you are watching on LinkedIn, I think you can rewatch it back on there as well. If not, come over to the Crowdcast page. You'll find the link everywhere on our pages, and you can watch it back. So yeah, again, thanks, Jai, and speak to you soon.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.